What's up? Hello, hello. I wanted to do another roundup video because I meant to do these frequently because I like them. Um, this is sort of the week after the, of course, big regionals where we just get loads of data and loads of matches happen and like just how things are going to evolve going forward. And I've done two videos and they've been sort of previously, after Sunday up till now, talking about how I think the meta is going to land and just if you're like anyone and if you're like me, anyone at your locals is like me, you've explored playing Green Steel again because it had such a good showing. And yeah, it's the cat's out of the bag with that one. Green Steel is just a solid choice right now. What it does well. It has insane openers that you can mulligan for, where you just blow people out the water with like Diablo to a Cove or Diablo and then sing something. That early shift line with Diablo or Diablo Ursula get a Prince John down, start singing some sudden chills and play it. You've got some really good lines where you can just blow people out of the water. Of course, on the flip side as well, I wouldn't say the deck is just insane combo pieces because the cards work by themselves. A one drop Diablo is playable. All the actions, it can be any action, so they can be discarded or used. And just Diablo as well can be played on three or played at any point and instantly put pressure on the board because it will require an answer as soon as possible. So yeah, but what I'm trying to make from that point is it can be this insane, really powerful high roll deck, or your turns can be ink player one drop, player two drop, play something on three that's not very impactful, and then your opponent might answer them. So I find it can either burst onto the scene and do really well, or really not. I've played a bit of it, and how I felt with with Green Steel is it's insanely proactive. It's a very proactive deck. It needs to be always doing things. It needs to be putting the fight towards your opponent. And then I find, say if your opponent does answer it, say they do board wipe, or they just have the characters to remove it, or they have the removal options, they can just work you into a spot where you go, oh, okay, well that was the best I have. I don't have anything to offer there going forward compared to a deck like Blue Steel where at any point, or I'm going to use Ruby Amethyst as well, but I use Blue Steel first. At any point, you could top deck a Whole New World, top deck a Tinkerbell, top deck a Grab Your Swords, and just keep going from there. Or as a Ruby Amethyst top deck of Be Prepared, top deck of Sisu, top deck of Rabbit into a Snake Bounce. Or I mean, yeah, they've got answers and they can keep it going. There's always a draw that they could possibly get to help them. But what I found with Green Steel, just in my personal preference of playing it, is it's just you do this really proactive gameplay, the most proactive in the game, and then if they do answer it, you kind of just have to forfeit there and lose. So you have to be very greedy on the mulligan and very strong on it. This roundup is not just going to be talking about Green Steel, but I have been playing a bit, so I just wanted to put my sort of 2 cents on it. Um, but yeah, we've seen how popular that deck is. I'm definitely going to see it at places in your locals. But I feel like if the meta is aware of this deck, it kind of goes back to like the way it was in set three, where okay, Blue Steel is very aware of this deck and aware of what it does. We'll just put more removal options. And Ruby Amethyst was saying we're very aware of it. Well, of course we've got 4x the rules. We've now got this big Elsa character that's quite useful as well. The 5 cost Elsa that's 2/5 that can give something exert something, then it has a rush, which you can deal with that as well. They've also still got all those options that they had in set three that I always thought were a little bit quirky, but they're possible. You've got the Thief and Ambitions, which is not a great one if they're just going to Ursula onto. But you've also got the Peter Pan Shadow and stuff like that, so they can, if you're really scared of a Green Steel matchup, you can definitely tech for it. And then Steel just overall has cards like Smash and Storm and Strength, and yeah. So I think if you're thinking about Green Steel being in the meta, it's definitely going to be treated. You're definitely going to be able to deal with it. And I also trying to say is people are going to know about it. It's just going to basically slide into the meta and be another deck that you play against. I don't think it's going to be overwhelming and destroy the meta. So yeah, going forward this week, I think it's still going to be that Ruby Sapphire is going to be really strong. It's going to take up a majority meta share. But that doesn't always mean that you're going to only play into it, because I'm still thinking of playing Blue Steel, and the list that I want to stick with is this, and this is the sort of changes I made after the weekend, and then after some chatting with players that I test with, and this feels quite fun to start playing this first week of post Birmingham and Vegas. I think it's still. I don't see why it can't do well, and just because I play a lot of Blue Steel, I'm very comfortable on the list, and I think there's a lot to work with there. The changes are really there for you want to be turning 2-0s from green purple, green steel, um, Ruby Amethyst, and Amber Steel as much as you can into 2-0s, and then Ruby Sapphire, you just have to accept that that's going to be a 1-1, and then push for a 2-0 if it's really possible. But all those other matchups, I think you definitely need to be going, right, so we're just going to have to cut off the Ruby Sapphire part of the meta and say that the rest of the matchups are all possible 2-0s. Every other thing in the field is a possible 2-0, but this one small bit isn't, which is Ruby Sapphire. Well, not small bit, it's the biggest bit, but it's still going to be the rest of the meta is 2-0 possible. So I think that's the way you have to approach Blue Steel right now, and it's not a bad approach. I mean, there's a lot of cheap character decks and stuff like that, green, purple, and green steel, purple steel. All of those are just sort of kind of cheaper, smaller characters that all still die to our steel removal, and then amethyst. Sorry, not amethyst. Amber steel as well. There's something you can work with there. I feel if you're confident in it and you know how to play that matchup, it's very winnable. Um, and then Ruby Sapphire, if we put the Arguses back in, we should be fine. I think it really is my approach to that. And with the Captain Hook putting more pressure on the board, Mickey to mean our hand size doesn't get shrunk as much. You can do a Hook, Argus, or Smee, Mickey, and just have this insane opener and then set up your wheel and just go from there. Or, use the Quill if not. But yeah, I think this is what I want to play. Touch on Green Steel. Ruby Sapphire is still just going to be that dominating deck at the top. I think with the other decks, there's not much really changing around. It wasn't like we got any data about Amber Steel changing its lists much. You're still going to have the Daisy versions and Lantern versions. I will say I saw the Daisy versions a lot more, and I think for a lot of players, I don't know how to word this without being rude to Amber Steel players, but I think the Daisy version is just a simpler setup. You're seeing a wheel, play cards, play Pete. That it makes sense to a lot of players, and I understand that. And then the Lantern build, of course, is like thinking I can do turn to Naveen, or I can do turn to Lantern and a Cindy, then build up to and then or sorry, no, you can do Lantern on 2, and then on 3 you can play the Cindy and the P, and then the following turn you can shift the little Cindy with the big Cindy, and you could do really fun plays like that. But it's still not as that's a little bit convoluted compared to just set up a single wheel, play characters, play Pete, and lock in lots of lore. So I don't think those lists are going to change as much. I think they're exactly where they are need to be, and that's good for us because we get to tech for them. Ruby Amethyst, I don't think changes much either at all. I think there's still going to be. I was still surprised locally and at Birmingham how many I played against that were still on Tremaine B King builds. Of course, if you're playing a lot of cheaper characters like Hook, Argus, Smee, Mickey, as long as you're not playing one jump ahead, I think you're fine. You'll just know when that's coming up. We always sort of have one extra character on board when we play things. It's just naturally how the deck lands. And then if you get caught out early on, like you have just went ramp into a big Tinkerbell, you go, right, okay, I need to think about that for game 2. And sadly, that's just how it's going to be. But I think those decks are few and far between. Sadly, there isn't any earlier tells because all the cards that are different are inkable. Possibly, if you're seeing more locations, maybe you can make a judgment call on that because those decks usually try and get locations down and protect them as well with the Tremaine and the B Kings. But yeah, I think Ruby Amethyst, 70% are still the whatever. No, I'm not playing for sure. Everyone's looking at his build, and then the rest will be the sort of Bruise and the B King builds as well. But yeah, I don't think much changes there. And like I said, no other decks really stood out as much. I think Hyper Aggro actually, in my opinion, personally, has gained a bit of respect over the weekend. Just actually scrolling through and seeing how well it actually performed. But I'm not seeing that mean an uptake in players who, sort of at your local scene or who are at tournaments are thinking, right, this is a meta via option now. Look how well it performed because we had some make cut. No, none of them are analyzing it like that, so that's fine. I think maybe they might tell casual players, and casual players might pick up the deck because they're like, oh, that deck made whatever, not casual players, but sort of one who's probably looking at events and doesn't really want to pick up a Ruby Amethyst and learn all the lines, or a Ruby Sapphire and learn its lines. They might go, oh, it is possible to make cut with Hyper Aggro. I'll probably try and play it. So I think you might see it played here and there more. And in my personal opinion, I've ended up respecting the deck a little bit more. But I think, yeah, a lot of what was shown, a lot of players made cut just through the familiarity of their decks. Big events like that, and even at store champs as well, you just don't know what you're going to be up against, and sometimes it's just people's brews and stuff like that. So you can do the meta calls on the Ruby Sapphire, but like I think I'm going to use the Hyper Aggro again. One of the reasons why that made cut is it just got the exact matchups it needs, whereas someone else on Hyper Aggro could have not get the exact matchups that it needs and just not make the cut. And I think that's how that deck worked and made cut, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think familiarity, confidence. I think that's why a lot of these RP players still do well. They know exactly what they need to do, and they just sit back and hope that you make a misplay a lot of the time. And that's a lot of the power of Ruby Amethyst is just going to consistently chug along towards its win con and sit and say, oh, you've missed ink, or oh, you haven't played that combo piece that you. It's like I thought you were going to sing Holy World, or you didn't. Cool, I'll just keep playing my cards then, and win the game. And that's just yeah. So I think sticking with a deck that you know, I don't think you should have come away from that weekend going, wow, I really want to play something new. If you maybe you were a green steel player, that's why I started playing it again. I quite enjoy green steel. I quite enjoy the aggro aspect of it. I was playing a Smee build when I did play it, but ended up just going back to blue steel because just yeah, I'm just much more familiar with it. I know what to do when it goes wrong, and I know what's of course you get to enjoy when it goes right. So yeah, I think that's all I really have to say on the weekend and sort of where I'm at with Lorcana for the next few days. So I'll probably be testing Blue Steel for Seattle and just making sure I've got everything right and then taking my chances when I get there. So yeah, I hope some of that rambling's fun to listen to.